Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Newman. I'm going to be moderating the Q&A tonight, and I'm hoping Stephen Maing is here and going to come up. Can't hear me. Sorry. Just one second. My name is Brian Newman. I'm going to be moderating the Q&A, but I think we are waiting for Stephen Maing, our director, to come in. He's coming down right now, so just one second. So hang with us one second. Our director is on his way. Brett Story, the co-director, actually had an emergency come up and wasn't able to join us tonight. But of the two co-directors, Stephen will be here in just 2 seconds. So bear with us one moment. I'm sure you don't have any questions for me, so I'm just going to wait till Stephen gets here. So, Stephen, join us. Big round of applause for Stephen and Brett Story both directing this film.
Thanks
Congratulations.
so much. Thank you.
Playing all around. You premiered at Sundance last year, right? And
That's right.
And now at the Hamptons Doc Fest.
Yeah, I was just talking to Eugene Hernandez about how quickly a year has gone by since we premiered it.
And prior to the film getting at Sundance, obviously you were shooting for about a year with the union workers. Is that right?
Oh
Or
no, we
longer?
were shooting about 3 years, and it was about 300 days of filming. The Amazon Labor Union spent about 360 days campaigning over the period of one very intense year.
And so how did you embed with these folks and get to know them and get such rapport with them as well? Because it's just amazing the access you have.
Yeah, I mean, so if you remember at the height of the pandemic, Chris and his friends led a walkout, for the lack of PPE that they were being asked to provide the rest of the world. And so
They're shipping it around the world, but they can't get it themselves.
exactly, yeah, they were seeing their friends get sick, hearing many stories of Amazon workers also dying, and so there were many upset workers. And so from that point, when he led the walkout, there was quite big news of that. After a memo was leaked, as you see in the film, that where Amazon executives were calling him not smart or articulate. And so I think that really put a sort of motivating fire underneath him to actually, fulfill this idea of like becoming the face of the union, as they had kind of undersold and underestimated him. And so from that moment, it was a year until he actually decided to set out to create a union drive. And our team was able to reach out in that time, make contact. And, this idea of like getting access was something I think people often, create this sense of the mystique of getting access. I mean, I think many of the stories that we document that have to do with a kind of like a politically or socially urgent crisis are often of people who want nothing more than the media and the public to gain access to them, right? And so I think there's a distinction between that and I like to think this idea of like maintaining trust, which is, it's a daily, weekly practice, right? I mean, we have to earn the trust of the people we film and document and show up. So I think that was maybe evident in just for them in the fact that a lot of media had come through and just sort of airdropped in and grabbed a headline or a pull quote and disappeared, and we stuck around for what turned out to be a 4-year relationship with them, and really showed up like kind of rain or shine with them as
You were
much as
there
we
in the
could
thick of it all the time.
during the thick of their 1-year like campaign, where they really were pushing hard, basically to get first an election certified and then the actual election. So
And it's amazing to me because there's scenes that are obvious that they were shot on someone's phone or whatever, but then there's certain scenes that I was 100% convinced you had somehow snuck in there because you're a cinematographer, beautiful eye for cinema, and some of these scenes are amazing. And just a second ago, I learned that some of those were actually the workers when it looks like it's the big screen as well. Can you talk a little bit about that creative process?
Yeah, I mean, so I love the interior footage of the factory, and I guess for a bigger picture perspective, like something I took from my work on a film I did previously called Crime and Punishment, which was it was kind of like a 7-year journey getting to know and then filming for 4 years these minority whistleblowers who are active duty cops exposing the NYPD for discriminatory practices. Something I learned on that project was when you ask for sanctioned access from any major institution or corporation or whatever, you're going to get kind of a propaganda piece. So during that filming, I actually made a parallel project with CNN where we got access to the NYPD, and I made a 1-hour doc. And every time I would talk to one of the officers or sergeants or lieutenants I was given access to, the minder would come over and be like, "That's a great question, but okay, here's how we should answer that." Right. You know what you're going to get when you ask for permission. So with Union, our team and my co-director Brett Story and I, we absolutely agreed that like this was, we were going to embrace the unauthorized aspect of this filming, which was to get the story that had been subverted. I mean, when you think about it, this is literally sort of the invisible working class that we were attempting to film, the people that have been forgotten. And by great design, Amazon and companies like Amazon have gone to great lengths to keep hidden from the public view. I mean, you look at like the kind of like geographically, just, simply as a from an aerial view, you go to any major metropolitan area and you look at where they put these warehouses, they're putting them like very much out of the public's line of sight because they need to be hard to reach, but they're actually also proximate to major shipping areas. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, we worked very closely with the participants, and one of the practices that they were heavily engaged in was creating documentation for unfair labor practices. And so we had a very close relationship, and they understood that what our mission was, right? That we were here to tell a sort of longitudinal story, to memorialize a history, and we would license. We created a deal where we would license the material that they were collecting, but also I talked a lot to them about like the way with which we wanted to make this film, which was like it would be an observational account. It would be about the lived experience, and we wanted people to have a chance to kind of bear witness and be as close to sort of the experience that they were living as possible. And so we talked a lot about like when they were doing the work that they did to gather evidence, how that could maybe be expanded and what other things they might see in that process.
So you get them artistic notes to fit your style as well.
Yeah.
It's very, very, it's cinema verite, but very stylized as well.
Yeah, and Nat, to her credit, the unhoused worker, she was fantastic, and she really got excited by kind of the idea of I mean, this is for all legal purposes, I'm just going to say that we didn't put them up to shoot any of this stuff, but like, she really understood the mission, and we got very excited.
If you happen to shoot, could you do it this way?
Yeah,
like that's awesome. And talk a little bit more about the choice. I mean, it's a documentary audience, so this is a friendly crowd to the documentary style. But there was a lot of conversation in the press and reviews over the time over the choice to go the cinema verite style. It's very much letting the story unfold and not telling you what you have to think. Can you talk a little bit more about that artistic decision?
Yeah, I mean, I am a big student of observational cinema. I love cinema verite. I believe deeply that like we have to, really honor the experience of the people that we are documenting and spend time with them. I think, there's a line that Ricky Leacock used to talk about, right? The great, documentarian that, like he was obsessed with this idea of the feeling of being somewhere. And that if you could just convey to people what it feels like to be somewhere, that those people might have a kind of transformational experience, right? I mean, it's the idea of the lived experience, this thing that is intangible. And for this film in particular, and the people in it, I think that the kind of the political meaning of that was really rich, because this is a group of people, right? When you look at sort of the demographics that had been in some ways for, almost our entire labor history had been barred from participating. We're not invited, right? Like in 1935, FDR's, New Deal reforms, wonderful package included the National Labor Relations Act, which allowed for the first time workers to legally, organize and bargain collectively against their employers. They could strike, whatever, what have you. This was a coup, but what was conspicuously missing from that law was domestic workers, agricultural workers. Who are they? They were minority workers, black, brown, immigrants, women. And so flash forward, 90 years later, there's, in these Amazon warehouses across the country, is this $1 trillion company that is preying on this exact demographic of workers. These are the most vulnerable workers, within our invisible labor force. And so, and they're the ones who were, lo and behold, kind of leading this new moment in labor organizing. Like, they were the new grassroots movement, and everyone in the established labor movement kind of underestimated them. They were there. They lended a little bit of material support. They, I don't want to make it seem like, Teamsters weren't there, UFCW, others, SEIU. There were unions there, but to my eye, they all hedged until the weeks before. There was tremendous momentum, and people were starting to feel like, fuck, these guys might pull this off.
Now we better be part of it.
And then they showed up, and then when they won, forget it. All the media came, their phones were ringing off the hook. Everybody wanted to be a part of this union now. But I mean, through all of this insane weather and insane anti-union busting activity, I mean, this group of workers, minority, women, intersectional group of workers and organizers with a little over $100,000 crowdfunding campaign beat over $14 million of union busting.
Yeah, it's amazing, and you capture that. I mean, you see them out in the rain and the cold and doing all this hard work, and it's clear they're doing the work, and no one else is for them. And there's that poignant moment when he, speaks back to Lindsey Graham, and it's like, it's not left or right. It's the working class. It's all of us. And I think you captured that really well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the union moment right now. I mean, that's Bernie's tweet, right? That union, the role of unions right now is a really incredibly ambitious one, and it's going to define the future course of this country, right? A union is the kind of organization that has to hold so many different kinds of identities and political positions and ideologies. At its best, it has a capacity that is fluid and yet bound, because there's a sense that at the end of the day, we have to protect the working class. That is the core of society and our engine of our economy and all of social progress and anything good that's ever come. The fact that we have a work day, the fact that we have child labor laws, all of this stems out of working class organizing. And so any of the social and political advances we make have to be considered as this is not like a a binary of politics, and so the organizers always talk about that, like as Chris says, in his rebuttal to Lindsay, yeah, and they would say that throughout, because in the Amazon warehouse there were Trump supporters,
Right.
there are plenty of them, and it was a big deal to them to not march through, with sort of like their lefty flags.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, because I'm very interested in the artistic part, but I also know that everyone's going to want to know a little bit about kind of the update of what's been happening since the film. First, before we get to the film itself, with the movement, like I know Amazon is just stonewalling them, but tell us a little bit more about what's been happening since then.
Yeah, so it's been 30 months since they won their election. Amazon has not met them at the bargaining table. There's been no bargaining order, so there's not sort of a legal mandate enforced yet for them to show up. I mean, that's all attributed by just labor law kind of being designed and the process being designed in favor of management and corporate interests. So, we can only imagine what is to happen in the coming months with a more conservative administration that is going to be more hostile to the idea of like even what the essential function and ideology of the National Labor Relations Board will be, right? I mean, this is an appointed set of, I think, 5 executives. And so I think the essential DNA of that is very much going to possibly make it harder for organizing victories like you saw here. But the positive side of that is that the ALU officially affiliated with the Teamsters. So there's a tremendous amount of strike funds that comes with that affiliation. And I think like, if anything, regardless of what your political affiliation is, I think everyone in the labor movement is feeling like, okay, this is the moment we have to, if ever, this is the moment we need to show up and we need to compel the public to show up with us.
So you've been through all this, you've lived it, you've been in there with them, and we've just been through this election, and whichever side you're on, it's clear a lot of this had to do with working class issues, et cetera, and it's going to be very much affected by this. How hopeful are you, having been with this group, for what's going to happen in the next 4 years with this movement? It's a lot to put on your shoulders. But.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of energy right now. There's a tremendous amount of organizing. I mean, the Amazon facilities have seen a lot of organizing committees pop up throughout the country. So that's a really exciting moment. Rolling this film out, has been an interesting process, right?
Let's talk about that. So tell us a little bit more about how you've rolled this out since the festivals. You're here at the Hamptons, but I know you just had a huge event with Black Friday to Giving Tuesday. Tell everyone a little bit more about the distribution side of the film.
Yeah, so the distribution side is we didn't get distribution, but...
But let's start this with, I just was on a panel with a couple of the producers 2 weeks ago at Doc NYC, and the title of the panel was, what to think about distribution when you're not going to get distributed because you're fighting gigantic corporations which own all of our streaming media. It's not just them, it's Apple, it's Netflix. They're gigantic corporations that are also fighting these same issues. So you were up against a lot to try to get distribution.
Yeah, I mean, this is an executive at the same company that was able to buy a newspaper and squash a presidential endorsement, right? I mean, these are the levers of power that documentary filmmakers are dealing with. So the idea of like political cinema not having any valuation for some reason is a very arbitrary and specific to the situation. But despite that, we also, in spite of that, I should say, we always planned for this eventuality that we're going to probably have to do this ourselves. So we spent the better part of this entire year doing our own self-release, built around this idea that if we can sort of like raise money on the back end in terms of organizations who believe in the mission of the film, and also understand that a film being seen is part of a film having impact, we could, create a lot of the structures that help kind of like, I think, resurrect films out of the kind of like a possible or eventual oblivion if you just are passive. So we were able to do our theatrical run in almost 25 cities.
That's great.
We have created a really robust impact campaign that's built around a worker screening series. So we're bringing the film out, collaborating with a lot of national unions and working, organizing committees at Amazon sites all over. And
so they're showing it to also continue the movement.
exactly, yeah. Okay. And then we've platformed it digitally on a site called Gather that allows us to do a few cool things. One is to create a kind of like pay it forward model, which allows people who have means to contribute to the paying for other people who don't have means. This way we can, try and help make our many funders a little bit more whole, get some equity investment back to the people who gave us this opportunity to make the film. And then lastly, there's a kind of like partner VOD feature, which is allows us to basically like offer the film to organizations that have little small or medium or large budgets to then hold their own screenings and bring workers to their own events. And so it's all part of this kind of digital platforming, and all the while also we're trying to engage in a more traditional awards campaign to kind of drum up press and some accolades and keep this moving.
So if people are in the audience and they happen to be members of the Academy, they should be looking for you in the screening room and thinking about maybe voting.
Oh yeah, please spread the word.
Spread the word.
Yeah, I mean,
and your website is?
It's unionthefilm.com.
Okay. I have a million questions, but we're going to take just 2 quick questions from the audience. We're about to run out of time, and there's a big reception coming up. So right here is the first hand.
Where did the 100,000 come from for them to get started, and how did Chris able to communicate with whoever to be able to do this, and how did he live without working, or was he working during this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was all individual small donations prior to the victory. And, he would get like a stipend from that. He lived, very modestly. It was a back room of a garage. You could see it in the film, some parts of that space, a very small space. And yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot of people who could have survived kind of like in that existence as long as he had. So it was
all while the union busters were trying to claim he was stealing the money to fund
yeah,
himself.
and he gets a lot of flack. I mean, look, like I think the film we wanted to make was one that allowed people to be charismatic, inspiring, incredible leaders, also be flawed. For people to have great bravery and to be be filled with self-doubt, right? That these are all real people. They're dynamic and they're not singularly defined. And Chris is no different. So whatever you're, there are plenty of critiques that have been made of Chris. Some of them are true. I think some of them are patently false, right? That he was spending union money to just fill his pockets, and by citing his clothes or jewelry. If you go up, all of the jewelry he wears is fake. But it's cultural, and I think it was a really interesting move to for him to say, the first Black-led, worker-led union movement in this country is going to be about a guy like me meeting my coworkers and friends where they are and not changing who I am and pretending to be a big union boss and wear a suit.
But how did he get the money to begin with to give out the free lunches, to give out?
It was crowdfunding. Right?
Oh yeah, sorry. It was a crowdfunding, like a GoFundMe, essentially.
Oh, it was a GoFundMe.
Yes.
Okay.
One last question, then we're going to have to wrap up right over here, and then.
Hi. This is weird. I feel like your film comes at an interesting moment where everyone's talking about the working class, especially moving toward the right or even away from like the Democratic Party, which is traditionally like big labor. How do you feel like this situation kind of like captures that like kind of weird paradox where like workers are supporting some movements and they're organizing more, but maybe moving away from more like traditional players in labor?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to any of the organizers themselves, they feel really let down by the Democratic Party. I mean, obviously, they don't feel supported by the Republicans either. I mean, there's a large sense that like they need to organize and chart their own path, and I totally understand it. I mean, just like it's interesting now because moving forward, I think the political discourse will seem to be about who gets to own the working class. But I think what's really interesting is that I think the labor movement and the grassroots organizing that's happening understands that they stand. I think they realize for maybe if now more than ever that what an important position that they occupy, right? Especially the Amazon workers because of the market share and the tremendous like worker density that they represent, that there's great power. So I think like I'm really excited to see like, there's like murmurs of like general strikes across Amazon and other industries to demonstrate, what their political platforming is and what the demands and what the actual issues that need to be advocated for are. I'll be really curious to see.
So we're going to have to wrap up, but we started this evening with a quick tribute to Ford Foundation and Just Films, who were crucial, I think, to getting this film made, along with many other donors and investors. So can you just say a little bit about the importance of that support in this environment into these kind of films real quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it really mirrors kind of the travails of the LU, right? Like, I mean, there's so many times when filmmakers like our team are trying to convince the world, like, no, this is going to be a big deal, right? Like, nobody sees it yet, but, we spent time with them. We know the work that they're doing. And it's, if not for organizations like Ford Foundation that came in and, in the most authentic way, deeply vetted and explored all our materials and application and us as individuals and understood that, there are projects worth taking great risks on. And we are so grateful to the Ford Foundation because there's no way we would have been able to make this film without them. And it's not just about money. It's about a kind of like holistic support. So it's like, there's a tremendous kind of brain trust when you become part of when you are brought into an organization like that. And I think having their vote of confidence also buoys, filmmakers. We live in just constant sort of states of uncertainty, like where you are questioning oneself. I mean, that's the work we do. I think that's all political work. That's all artistic work. It's living in a state of questioning and uncertainty and doubt. And so, while I think the greatest sorts of like, the great things are born out of that, when you lean into it, we don't do that without organizations like Ford Foundation. So,
well, thanks to the Ford Foundation for supporting it and everyone else who did as well. Thank you and Brett for making this film.
yeah, thank you all for coming out on a
Thank you as
cold
an
night.
audience for coming out for it. I know the film festival has a reception starting upstairs, so we've kept you a little bit too long from your drinks and food, but we hope you enjoy that as well. And thanks for staying for the show.